Hello, hello. What's up, plebs? Welcome to another episode of Bob Radio. Bob stands for Build on Bitcoin. Today, we have a very special episode. Episode 21. God damn it, how did we get here? For this episode, we call it the Pleb Builder episode. And we have with us today a very special guest, Mr. PortlandHODL. Portland is an open source contributor to Bitcoin Core and is currently working with Marathon Digital to implement SlipStream and other mempool template control tools. And if for those of you who have hung out on Twitter Spaces, Portland is well known to you as a guy who can explain technical things in layman's terms very simply. Welcome, Portland. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing superior, and thanks for having me on the show tonight. I am excited to talk about building on Bitcoin, open source contributions, a little professional stuff, I guess, like once you're building on Bitcoin and somebody offers maybe to pay you to do something and you like doing it, like we can discuss all of these things and maybe even more throughout the show. But yeah, I'm just thankful to be
LARPing,
here.
Portland. Don't forget
yes,
LARPing.
we absolutely will
we need
talk
to discuss
about
LARPing. Yes.
Yes, we will discuss LARPing. It is a very important thing on every Bitcoiner's journey is the LARP.
Right. Okay. And with us today, my co-host, Sovereign Skate. Say hi, Sovereign.
Hi, Piccolo. Hi, Portland. Portland, we briefly met at TapConf last year.
Yes.
I was like seeking for like Dan Goods, but you kept him a prisoner. I think you both were like hacking into something.
We were actually doing a pay join, basically running through the pay join software. So he's working on pay join, which is basically a way to join payments together and kind of basically mix coins a little bit and anonymously and trustlessly. And yeah, we actually ran through on reg test. Like he said, I have 45 minutes to do it. It took about an hour though. So that was likely because of my hardware at the time at TabConf. I went with this. I didn't have a laptop. I've always worked off a desktop. I took a 2015 MacBook Pro and I left Mac OS X on it. That was the worst decision to go to TabConf with a Mac. And immediately when I came home, I got a YubiKey and Flash Ubuntu on it, and now it's great. But yeah, so that's why it took a little extra time. So sorry for taking Dan Gold from you. That was one of the best experiences I had at TabConf was working with him. So hopefully next time I will let him work with you instead.
All good, Portland. All right, I'll move to the rapid fire question section. You ready? This should be
quick, let's go.
Snappy, and you should answer each question without overthinking. So let's keep the energy high. Ready, Portland?
Yeah, let's go.
First question, what's better than hacking?
Bitcoin.
Second, favorite spot in Portland?
I can't even say like, yeah, I got too long. Next. I don't even really go into Portland. Okay, continue.
Third question, BitDevs or the hackathon?
Hackathon. I run the local BitDevs, but definitely, are you saying like the comparison between the two? Which one would I choose?
What do you prefer? Yeah. What's more fun
hackathon 100% actually building. BitDevs is amazing. I love the local BitDevs culture and like explaining what got built on Bitcoin each month. But actually building and doing is infinitely better than talking.
Nice. Fourth one, you're gonna hate this one. Bitcoin price prediction for end of the year.
1 BTC equals 1 BTC.
Hell yeah. And last one, when Thailand?
Soon. TM. I have no idea, to be honest, on that.
We'll make it happen. We'll make it happen.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Piccolo.
All right, Piccolo, over to you. Thank you, Portland.
All right, Portland. For our second section of the show, we talk about your personal journey into Bitcoin, and like to begin the question by saying, what was your Bitcoin journey, Portland? How did PortlandHODL find Bitcoin, or how did Bitcoin find PortlandHODL?
I think it really starts like ultimately it begins with like the get rich quick, stay for the revolution kind of thing, but there's some nuance to it. So basically, I've always ran different programs on my computer to basically use CPU cycles during my idle time, right? So Prime 95 was one of those things. It's where it searches for a 1,000,000-digit long prime number. I would run that on my desktop computer, just consuming power and CPU cycles. The next thing was SETI at home, which is like basically run this BOINC client on your computer, and it would do calculations to basically look for extraterrestrial like signals and life forms or potentially things like that. Then World Community Grid, which was you use your extra CPU cycles for looking at like basically folding proteins and stuff. So like how can you create cures to diseases? And Bitcoin kind of fit into this in a really interesting way, is that in 2011, I actually downloaded the Bitcoin client and attempted to generate coins from the client using CPU cycles. That did not really work, but that was my first introduction into Bitcoin. From there, I kind of did keep that interest alive for quite a bit after, and then moving to a GPU later on. I had an AMD Radeon or ATI Radeon graphics card at the time. And from there, I actually did a little bit of Bitcoin mining and connected to Slushpool. And I actually had a few coins back then, but I didn't understand like what I even had. And so 2013 rolls along, check the news, like, because I browsed like Reddit quite a bit back then. And oh, hey, like this is the price went insane. I didn't know exactly what I had or even cared what I had. To me, being a college student, fiat minded, like this is my way out of debt. So yeah, you take those coins and you sell them, and then you collect, and then you're done. There was also a little bit of marketplace buying as well. Back then, 2013, there were some various like online stores you could go to and spend those Bitcoins. So did that as well. But yeah, at that then it cleared the treasury, and there was nothing left. And the worst part about it is after that moment, like there's like the double top, and I'm pretty sure I got in on the second side or out on the second side of that. And so the price drops precipitously after that. So like it goes 10,000 bucks, like keeps going down to 800, 700, 600, 500, 400, whatnot. And the whole time you're thinking it was all a scam the whole time, right? Like I got out at the perfect time. And so you don't buy back in on the bottom, but it never kind of leaves you that, oh, wow, like I actually like did so little work in and worked with a really kind of cool, interesting thing. And I used these CPU cycles, and they actually paid me out a lot more than I put in. So around 2016 became like, I worked at Intel at that time, and me and a coworker basically went in together on some miners, some S9s, and got a little space and started Bitcoin mining again, collecting those coins. And again, it was actually overall pretty profitable in terms of the exchange rate, right? Like at that time, I was still fiat minded, and everything was measured by dollars. I think the only thing I even cared about was during the block size wars in 17. I remember Slushpool had the option of you could pick between SegWit or Bitcoin 2x and what you wanted, or SegWit 2x, whatever they called it basically for Bitcoin Cash. And you could select the two sides of where you wanted to point your hash rate. And I just, because of like the smooth brain, I just went, oh, I don't want Bitcoin to change. So I just clicked the regular just SegWit activation. And then so yeah, continue on mining, cycle keeps going, and you right around probably like 6 or 8,000 bucks, I was like, oh, this is definitely a scam again, you know, and I sold. But this time was a little bit different because in 2018, I actually started looking at like the code to understand like what actually makes this stuff work. And then understanding a lot more about like, okay, this is why this works, the difficulty adjustment, the way coins are basically managed through UTXOs, etc., like the wallet software that was Bitcoin Core to me, like all the other things around Bitcoin beyond just, hey, coin equals price. And I realized like, oh, wow, this is actually like a replacement monetary system. This is much better than the thing I've been selling it for. And so then began the race to basically like sell everything I own to continue basically reaccumulating what I'd lost over the years and traded it out of, right? So I traded out of the coins, got USD, and then now it's a race to get back into coins again. And so from here, like, yeah, I became just deving on Bitcoin, contributing, and basically accumulating as much as possible. And then next came, like, I would say the Twitter phase of like my Bitcoin journey, where I just ended up just by chance in 2020 joining up on a Twitter space with DJ Satoshi. And I started talking about kind of like my Bitcoin projects, like how I had been working on trace points for the mempool, done some stuff for Vladimir for makeseeds.asn, and just various other like little RPC things in Bitcoin Core. And
that's probably the first time I've heard you speak. But yeah, keep going.
And yeah, so that was the next part of the journey was, and I realized like there's a huge mystery around like what Bitcoin is, like that same mystery I had like had and still am working through every day, right? Like I don't understand everything about Bitcoin, but everybody else is going on the same journey to understand like what is this thing like under the hood and actually like what makes it tick. And so kind of going over and talking about Bitcoin in a very simple way, people really liked hearing that stuff and like kind of like absorbing through osmosis and watching the people that kind of listened in and tuned into these little radio shows I hosted over and over and over again. Like some of those guys are actually contributing to Bitcoin Core now. So yeah, it was just really fun to kind of tell people about Bitcoin and get people excited about the magic. Or sorry, I would say actually demystify what was previously magic into the mechanical parts that makes this whole thing function and do such amazing things for humanity, right? And yeah, so that was the third phase, and just meanwhile contributing to Bitcoin Core, and also as well as kind of like the Linux kernel, OpenStreetMaps, Polias, like all these other just random projects. Like anytime I find something I don't like about an open source project, I'll literally just like fix it and then submit the code and do a pull request. And yeah, so along with that is just like deving on Bitcoin. And then I think the next era is like professional work in Bitcoin, like getting a job with a Bitcoin company. And that actually occurred at TabConf, right? So I was approached by somebody from Marathon and they handed me their business card. And I actually, to be honest,
Wait,
thought
the last TabConf that we met at?
Yep, correct.
Oh, nice. All right.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
like I went to this thing and I didn't network at all. Like I literally didn't even
Dude,
really.
you remember you didn't want to go, and I was like, Portland, you gotta come.
Yeah.
You need a ticket. You want to come? Want a ticket? I was willing to give you a ticket, but you bought your own
Thank you
ticket and
so
you
much.
came. Yeah.
Yep. And so, yeah, with that said, like I'm thankful to Michael Tidwell and everybody for like getting the fire lit under me to go to this thing. And yeah, so I go to TabConf and I literally sit down at the Bitcoin core table and I don't stop working on a PR the entire time. But in the meantime, though, like I did go to these little different seminars and sessions and I would just like listen and then I'd take down some notes, do like the exercises and stuff and learn while I'm there. But yeah, somebody from Marathon, I'm not going to name them by name, approached me and they hand me their business card and then we kind of ask a few questions about like transaction malleability and like what are the possible cases for this. And next thing you know, like I go home and I totally forget about it, like literally forget. And yeah, business card, I still have it, but like I just put it in like this pile of stuff and I keep working on this open source stuff. But then, yeah, like I get a DM like, hey, like, can you answer a couple questions? And then I was like, okay, yeah. And then we get to talking. And next thing you know, like, could you be a contractor for us? And I was like, yes, I would love to be a contractor. And I always want to be a contractor, like, because of the fact I love the flexibility. I love, like, I just love the freedom it provides, like choosing the projects I want. Like I'm never bound to like, I have to do this specific project. I do the things that I want that are fun. And then, yeah, working for Marathon,
Right.
like,
Maybe
oh, you
let
can
me
go.
let me pause you there because
Sure.
that's an important point that I was going to bring up later. But the fact that you're a contractor kind of goes over the heads of many people, especially haters on social media who don't go past a couple inches deep on any subject, right? So that's a very important point because you do have control over, number one, your own time, but more importantly, what you choose to work on and what you choose to build for Marathon or for whoever is contracting you, such that you don't have to compromise your principles or do anything that you don't want to do, honestly. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the best things about Marathon. They never pushed me to do anything. I was the one that came up with SlipStream, right? I was the one that like really kind of like got the kickoff of like, this is the idea. We have control over these transactions. Like we could demonstrate this. And no, the actual pixel art was not my idea. That was the CTO. But with that said, yeah, like these things all became a reality because I enjoyed this kind of work. I loved the challenge that kind of like was presented with, okay, what happens when you take Bitcoin Core and you start just accepting everything that's valid consensus? Like what problems? And the amount I learned about Bitcoin and some of like the nuances of like, hey, there are actual ways you really can attack Bitcoin with transactions that you shouldn't do, but they're still enabled. They haven't been cleaned up out of consensus yet. And there's also things that people don't like, but there's also really powerful things as well that you can exploit. And my not like exploit, but utilize. And one of my favorites is like bare multisig, right? So bare multisig is the ability to basically put your pub keys on chain. So you can do like 4 out of 6 multi-sig, and you'll just literally do op4, put 6 pub keys, op6, op-check multi-sig. And why that's so different than anything you have today is because with a bare multi-sig, the pub keys are already on chain. You literally just have to bring your signatures, and that's it. You don't have to worry about like the whole script that goes along with it.
This was what I was asking D++ about, like when you hopped off, must have been yesterday, your time. And she was, that's so cool, dude. Well, can we pause? Can you kind of park that? I mean, I need to dig down deeper with you on the bare multi-sig addresses. But sorry, I wanted to maybe give a quick summary because you did a great job of actually, by answering the first question, outlining essentially the flow of the show. So, again, props. But let me summarize a little bit from what, and the thing that, surprised me, I guess, because, I think we've known each other for a while, was that I didn't realize that it took 4 touches for Bitcoin to kind of hit you. You know what I mean? It's because by the 4th touch is what really got you, because the first 3 touches, you were like really close. You were right there, right? It seems. Yeah.
The thing was, I would say that ultimately I was too naive and too young, right? Like I was pretty young, and like, according to everybody in your life, like, how do you measure somebody's success? Like the first thing you can do is either their achievements in terms of like accolades. Like, so if somebody has like some sort of
papers,
degree,
right? Yeah.
Like papers, or even
papers,
like or somebody who's like maybe a rock star, like they got the identity, and so that's easy to identify. Or Usain Bolt, that's the fastest guy on planet Earth, right? No questions. But the second thing for most people that's easiest is like, well, right? Like, what can you do to kind of display like you're a part of like this class system? And yeah, I was caught up in like the fiat mindset, and Bitcoin was a tool to me at that time to basically obtain more fiat to display or kind of achieve the values of like the family and society, and like show like, oh, I can make it according to fiat terms. But the reality is I sold the world's most pristine asset for garbage money that gets printed in bulk during some pandemic or some other instance. I guess not even just the pandemic. The pandemic was the most overt display of money printing, but it never stopped, right? And as such, I basically traded the most pristine thing with a finite supply based in mathematics and code through social consensus for garbage money. But it was all because of the social standards. It was once I understood like the problems with the monetary system and how Bitcoin solved that through code, that's when everything clicked. Like,
but I think that's part of the Bitcoin journey, isn't it? To where you come to the realization that that last sale that you did, you're like, what the fuck did I do? Right?
Yes,
what
absolutely.
the fuck did I do?
Yeah. The cope is I don't regret any of it. Like everything is on chain. It's a part of Bitcoin's history. Like me selling Bitcoin to somebody maybe was their HODL moment. Like my Bitcoins became their stack. That to me makes me like happy on the inside. That somebody was likely to benefit off it. Who knows? Maybe somebody just traded away. But at the end of the day, like, what is the quote kind of used pretty often? Like, everybody gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve. Yeah, I got multiple opportunities to buy it cheap. I just didn't realize what I had. And I never actually bought. It was mostly mining, right? Like I didn't use these exchanges until like to buy. But yeah, overall, definitely, yeah, there were multiple touches. And then it's just not all code though. You have to understand what money is too. And you have to understand the problems with fiat money, which is primarily the dilution of these Chuck E. Cheese tokens or these tickets they hand it to people that represent account balances, right? Like it's so invisible.
Do you think that's why so many talented devs that would otherwise be, contributors to Bitcoin kind of hang around these shitcoin projects because they don't really think about money the same way, and they look at any project as a technical project rather than, having the aspect of money, true money. Right.
Yeah, that's one thing for certain. I think the one thing about like shit coins and why they dev on them is because they all claim to offer better on paper like stats, right? Like Ethereum, the block time's 12 seconds, blah blah blah. And like it's like if you just look at Bitcoin and Ethereum on paper, like why would you choose Bitcoin? Like this thing sucks, no Turing completeness, and like all these things.
But that's the beauty. Well, okay, Portland. I mean, we've spoken about this. That's the beauty of it. It's Turing incomplete. You don't want Turing completeness for money, guys. Please.
Absolutely. And so like the way I akin it to is like, have you ever seen like cars with body kits on them? So they take like this like basically $5,000 used Honda Civic and they put like this body kit on it that makes it look like a supercar. And it looks and feels like something that's interesting. Like everybody wants to check it out. But if you actually like open up the doors and look at the interior and fire up the motor or step on the gas, like there's nothing there. It's all garbage, right? But Bitcoin, it actually kind of undersells itself a little bit. It looks like it's a sleeper, right? It's actually it's the oldest one. It's a lot of people go, oh, Bitcoin's too simple. You can't do a lot with Bitcoin. To that, I say
Portland,
you don't understand Bitcoin enough. And then once you actually like open up the doors of this vehicle, wow, this thing's actually incredibly well put together. It's incredibly fast. Like this is a really cool thing. It's so reliable. This is a solution to a problem and not just some car with a body kit on it. So
that's a great analogy. Okay. So on aside from those touches, the other things which I drew out of kind of your description was, stuff that we've already talked about before, but maybe not repeated enough, which is nobody understands everything, not even PortlandHODL, not anybody,
nope.
right? And the other part is, in doing so, it just means that, you can't, well, it means Bitcoin isn't yet perfect. That's why people are working on it. If Bitcoin is perfect, nobody would be working on it. And I don't think, and is it true that, from a technical, dev perspective, no software project really ever achieves quote unquote perfection, right? Perfection means, ossification, sure, but even people who want things to ossify still needs the ossified Bitcoin to be maintained. Does it not?
Yes, absolutely. You need to like even if Bitcoin ossified today, you'd still have to add more RPC calls and more functionality to build better tools on Bitcoin so you can scale Bitcoin globally, or at least make it a functional settlement system for the entire planet Earth, right? You have 1 megabyte of base block data or up to 4 million weight units or 4 megabytes of SegWit included data the whole planet has to share. Bitcoin Core is not in a state for the whole planet to jump on board to Bitcoin right now and build commercial level infrastructure around this client. It's amazingly robust right now, but it's definitely not complete. So even the argument of like ossifying, you're not done with Bitcoin Core. And then the second thing is like software can't ever be complete because unless the software can do absolutely everything perfectly, somebody will find another way to improve it. Like there's no way that a software project ever just achieves true perfection and it's just done. Like you literally just put the thing down and make one final binary of it and you call it a day.
Well,
done.
the trippy thing about sort of Bitcoin itself as a software project, never has anyone or, a mass group of people put a value on a specific software project that, essentially runs on its own because different nodes around the world, spin up Bitcoin Core. You know what I mean? It's just,
Yeah.
it's one of those very mind-bending things that if you think about it, it's like, damn, really? Sometimes you're a Bitcoin. We got a lot of our shit in Bitcoin. But sometimes you got to kind of think, really? But if you don't, I don't think you're a Bitcoiner either. If you don't ever question anything about Bitcoin, then you probably aren't, or you haven't been in it long enough. I guess is what I'm gonna say.
Agreed. Yeah, I think there's two kind of ways to view. I think there's two ways to view Bitcoin. The naive approach is just to go like, okay, it's just say it's perfect money, we're done, right? Like it's already good, just leave it, ossify it, and it'll all work out. I think actually technically that's a very correct answer, but the road to that final end journey is going to be fraught with problems, right? Like people are going to have like little wars between their tribes about different scaling solutions, what the best use cases for money, and like we're even seeing right now, like on Twitter, medium of exchange versus store of value. Nobody can come to a complete conclusion of which one Bitcoin is, to which I answer it is technically both, right? But some people are in the camp of medium of exchange is the most important functionality of Bitcoin. Store of value is on the other camp, like Saylor. He'll go, that's store of value. Obviously, that's what Bitcoin does. And yeah, as such, the views of what Bitcoin is will lead it never to being completely ossified or ever having just this perfect smooth sailing journey into success. So at the end of the day, I don't think Bitcoin should ossify by any means, but I also put in my caveat. I don't think soft forks should be looked at from a technical lens purely as frequently anymore. And that is because the social consequences of soft forks can take a very long time to proliferate or propagate through the Bitcoin ecosystem. And decisions made in the block size wars technically are having adverse effects on some subset of users that don't enjoy the kind of things that brought about. That took basically 7 years to basically propagate through Bitcoin.
Wait,
and
Portland, are you talking about hard forks or soft forks?
Soft
you
forks.
said soft forks, okay.
Soft forks, correct. Yeah, soft forks. So my example is the SegWit discount, right? And I've been thinking quite a bit about it and like its effects socially. And at the heart of it, like why the SegWit discount was incredibly good was it fixed transaction malleability, enabled Lightning, and technically was supposed to like increase TPS to a small degree, right? Because you could put more in a block by using that witness area for signatures. The reality is, though, there's one kind of like social side effect that came out of it, and that's that you actually created 2 tiers for data in Bitcoin, right? You have like the first class data, which is anything that is used by a Bitcoin transaction as part of the base block, or that 1 megabyte. All those weight units are marked up by 4 for compatibility reasons, so you don't hard fork Bitcoin. But there's like this second class where you can actually get a discount and not have your weight units marked up, and you basically get 25% of the charge that you'd have to use to get that in the base block portion or in the script seg. And why this is so interesting is because after creating SlipStream, it really kind of dawned on me that the biggest beneficiaries of the SegWit discount aren't the people doing financial transactions on Bitcoin. And the reason why is because if I do a pay to witness script hash, right? Actually, let's go to pay to witness public key hash. That's a better example. So basically you're spending from a pub key by putting in a signature. Really, and that's one of the most used transaction types. And really in terms of the amount of data that I got discounted at that discount rate, I get like 72 bytes or something for the signature. And plus a pub key. So you get like maybe like 90 bytes that are discounted, but the majority of the transaction is still marked up at a rate of 4x in terms of the weight unit. So I'm still paying a lot for this first class base block data. But do you know the person that gets the maximum benefit from the witness discount? Some guy who decides he wants to inscribe or put like a giant BitVM transaction that uses basically 4 megabytes of witness data and puts like 150 bytes in the base block portion. So 150 of his bytes got marked up to 4x, but nearly 4 million of his other bytes basically got 1 weight unit each, and he got a discount.
Right, but that's what the SegWit weight discount was. The witness weight discount was supposed to do, right? I mean, they're within
absolutely.
the consensus rules. I mean,
within the consensus rules, that's
point?
absolutely the way it's supposed to work. And according to the original, I'm assuming, thoughts about how this would be used, was that it would be used for scripts that have functionality. You put that in the witness with the pay to witness script hash, or you put pub keys. But the act of using that as a data storage mechanism for discounted data storage, I don't think really dawned that that would become a use case for that specific thing. And with SegWit, you had the initial limitation of the scripts could only be 10 kilobytes in length. But with Taproot, that second soft fork that came later, you ended up adding an additional kind of clause where the limit to the amount of stuff you could put in the witness section was no longer bound to 10 KB. It actually became the entire block. And that basically ushered in the perfect, basically the way you get the maximum discount for SegWit was to either craft a very complex transaction, which actually did happen, I'll go into that, or unfortunately, what most people have started using it for is just putting data on Bitcoin, arbitrary data. And I hope to see BitVM transactions, but right now it is entirely basically JPEGs.
Wait, but then again, we discussed the game theory of this at length, man, in many calls before. At the end, don't you think that the more dense economic transactions would ultimately crowd out these stupid arbitrary transactions?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. I agree with that. Like it's going to happen. But the fact, like my butt on that statement is that in the short term, those monetary transactions that can utilize the full power of what is enabled by
I agree. The stupid people have more money than we actually realize, but they don't have infinite amount of money, you see?
No, correct. And that's like SlipStream, just take the money and it's not going back into that ecosystem again. It's literally just getting locked up into Mara's HODL.
Yep.
Right. And so, but with that said, the reason why that became the first use of that kind of limit that was set, or the limit that was removed by Taproot, was because that's the easiest thing and the least complex thing it would take a human brain to do with that space, right? Is just, okay, I can just put a JPEG in there. That's like the easiest thing. Okay, we take the JPEG and we encode it and put it in the Bitcoin transaction. Do it actually takes a lot of thought is like, how do we do a BitVM transaction? Or even like Burak did, he made a 998 out of 999 multisig that took up 500 some kilobytes.
Oh, you mean the time? Remember the time when Burak killed Lightning for a bit?
Yeah, he killed Lightning, but he used that as a demonstration of like, okay, it actually technically wasn't a financial transaction for financial gain. It was to demonstrate, hey, you need to fix your stuff, BTCD, because you're going to break. And they didn't do it. So he broke basically LND. And yeah, so at the end of the day, like kind of landing the plane on soft forks, I'm not for ossification, but at the same time, the social consequences of soft forks in the basically the medium and short term should be weighed a little bit heavier in comparison to the technical aspect of can this work? And with that said, that leads into my final thing. I don't want soft forks for the sake of getting yet another feature to kind of parade around and pump one's bags, right? Because sometimes it feels like, hey, we should activate this soft fork to make Bitcoin's price appreciate in terms of the exchange rate and not thinking about the social consequences of that soft fork, or even sometimes the technical consequences of a soft fork.
Well, I mean, the way I feel about it is if we're going to do a soft fork, it has to actually increase some key feature that, we're lacking. Scalability,
Agreed.
security, anonymity, privacy, whatever, one of those. If not, then fuck the forks. No forks,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely, 100%. With that said, I agree with all that. I just want to make sure and look at soft forks now more so. I understand the things that these things can do today, but what does this thing look like 10 years down the road? Because Bitcoin's, the time horizon which it exists on is far bigger than my lifetime, right? So just thinking a little bit deeper, because I used to look at the soft forks from just a purely technical aspect of like, this is what it does. The code looks good. I love it. Taproot was a great example of that. Like I was all for taproot.live or whatever. You watch the little site come in, the miners are signaling, and you waited, and eventually it happened, right? You activated with speedy trial, good to go, good to go, good to go. And Taproot looked on paper to me like the perfect solution, other than the X-only pub keys didn't provide quantum resistance. And now I'm not backing off my stance that Taproot was good for Bitcoin. It just created a little bit of a moment for pause in my mind to just understand that people will do things with the tech that is built that may not be anything that anybody had expected or thought that would actually be achieved at the scale that is noted, right? So people knew that Taproot could be used for data storage on Bitcoin, but I don't think anybody thought the combination of some arbitrary scheme on top of Bitcoin, this meta protocol of ordinals, would then be combined with the Taproot data storage to not only store data, but then literally create entire protocols on top of Bitcoin using these lenses.
Just even that little example of what you described is kind of why things like, opcat is like super dangerous, because if opcat ever gets activated, Portland, every single new opcode added is gonna have to be, matched against in combination with every other opcode in existence. My God, right?
Yep.
Just
like,
yeah.
Look, the only thing I like cat for is if you activate, like, I'm definitely not acking cat for sure. Like, don't take that statement here. And by the way, I want to put in one note since we are live. I am a contractor for Marathon as my job, quote unquote, right? So I do stuff for them. I do not by any means represent the voice of Marathon. So anything I say, it's not Marathon's terms. Just throwing that out there for anybody that wants that. But yeah, like opcat.
That's called for the audience, like the 6 audience people that will listen to this show later. That's called just legal disclaimer, guys.
Yeah,
Keep going,
that's
Portland.
that's the fine print right there from PortlandHODL. Like I will talk about things like what I'm working on at Mara and like how that happened, but the finer
Hey,
details,
dude,
I just
can
thought,
we
yeah.
like switch to something lighter and then we'll like jump to like the marathon stuff? Yeah.
Oh,
So,
okay,
okay,
sorry.
first question. Well, couple questions and then we'll pivot. But
Sure.
why the HP12C calculator, Portland? I know why, but why for you?
Wait, what? HP12C?
Did you not use a HP12C calculator?
No.
Which calculator
I
did
had
you use that you have RPN function on it, the reverse
oh,
Polish notation?
yeah, so the HP calculator, if you want to go to that side of things, was an HP48G2. So
Okay, I know that one.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. My model is from 1994 and I still use it today. And the reason
Dude,
why
I got a 1990, I'm saying 1995 HP12C. Yeah, same vintage. Sure, go ahead.
yeah, and the reason why like that calculator I used all through college, like converting radians to degrees and vector ops and stuff.
And
Like why
it's RPN only, right?
yes, RPN only,
Okay,
but the
dude, that's it.
reason
That's the way to
why
go. RPN only. Yep.
that was perfect for my Bitcoin journey because
Mm-hmm.
of the fact that RPN is a stack-based
Yes. Yeah.
method of entering data into calculators. So
Uh-huh.
basically what happened was I had always been entering stack elements. So like to add two things together, I'd put a 2 in there, put a 2 in there,
Two
and then do a
enter, two
plus.
plus. Yep.
Yeah, and like literally just boom. And that's how I'd operate the calculator. And then I get Bitcoin script. I was like, this is a giant HP calculator. This is so
Yes,
easy, you
that's
know? And
exactly
there's
what I thought. That's
yeah,
exact. This is a giant HP12C, but for you is the HP whatever, 48G.
I actually thought about like a fun little exercise. I actually want to write the ECDSA algorithm in the basic language that it uses and see if I can actually get my HP48 to sign a Bitcoin transaction, like send it over
Dude,
the serial port
do it.
and literally have this calculator from 1994 sign a Bitcoin transaction.
Hey, if you can do that, then your next project is do my HP12C, please.
I don't know about the 12C, but yeah, the 84G is pretty nice. Yeah, okay. So that's that question there.
All right. Okay, cool. Okay, the last one on this section is, you remember in December we won a space and for some reason you brought up like, I'm a LARP. If anybody's listening out there, PortlandHODL is a LARP. Why did you say
Absolutely.
that? And what do you mean?
I say that because my Bitcoin, like in terms of the acceleration in my Bitcoin journey, so the moment that I became a public figure, like I had Bitcoin contributions under my belt, like makeseeds.py, memory trace points, and some pretty deep stuff. But the reality is that Twitter actually pushed and pumped my image more than what I actually was. Like I didn't ask for it, but it happened. And yeah, as a LARP, like I just put on the mask and like filled the shoes and I just kept going with it. Like I actually, it encouraged me to contribute more to Bitcoin and like dive even deeper. Cause I was like, oh, people want this like even more than what I was doing already. And that really harnessed and put my energy towards something. But no, I was not like this full-time like Bitcoin core contributor, like some of the greats like Luke and Shores and Sipa and like, yeah, all those guys, like they actually have an infinite number of hours more than I did. But yeah, still nonetheless, like it became like I just LARPed my way into the role of like a Bitcoin core contributor. And I just never took off the mask. I loved working on it. I loved the development pace. It was nice. And like you'd always just keep a rolling thing of PRs around and you'd find issues in Bitcoin and you'd submit pull requests and talk to people over issues.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
yeah, definitely.
if that's your definition of a LARP, then everyone is a LARP, right? As we were talking about
Exactly.
pre-show. But at least you're showing proof of work and putting things out there to be used, to be examined, and to be scrutinized. So, that's for me, if that's how your definition of a LARP, dude, that's the very best definition of a LARP.
Thank you. I appreciate
I
it.
wish
Yeah,
more
no,
people would LARP then, you know what I mean?
absolutely. And that's what's kind of cool is watching like all the, like I joke, the future LARPs in those Twitter spaces start becoming devs of their own and they will literally start contributing code to various projects. I know some guys who contributed to Lightning projects. I know a couple Bitcoin Core contributors as well now that came from just listening to those Twitter spaces and learning about Bitcoin through osmosis and then actively starting to engage with the mechanics underneath the hood.
Perfect. Okay, perfect segue into our next section. So Portland, for the next section, I guess we'll focus on, the stuff that you're building at Marathon, I guess, that's SlipStream, and then the other, which I like to call mempool pixel art. And then from there, let's see how we're doing on time. I'd
Sure.
like to ask you more about, mining stuff and generally maybe get a little bit stratum if you want. But
Yeah,
okay.
that'd be fine.
So for the section, maybe I'll have Sovereign start with talking about SlipStream, and then I'll go into the pixel art stuff. Sovereign, over to you, sir.
Right. Portland, how does SlipStream facilitate the learning process for miners that, let's say they're like interested in incorporating non-standard transactions into the chain? And what have you learned while building this?
I would say that by opening yourself up to non-standard transactions, the first thing that you're going to learn immediately is that there are actually bad transactions in Bitcoin. And you have to make sure, like, it is, I would say, my own opinion, like, I am definitely for freedom of transactions. Like, whatever people want to do, as long as you pay the fee, like, I'm okay with it. But there are two cases I found in Bitcoin where transactions could actually create blocks that make nodes have to process data for minutes at a time. And that is the quadratic hash problem. So a type of transaction that could be created that's non-standard is if somebody takes basically like 5,000 inputs from legacy addresses and then does like a single output. Well, that will create an environment where you'll have to basically apply that hashing algorithm for the signatures a squared number of times. So 5,000 times 5,000, 2.5 million times. And that can create blocks that take around 12 seconds to process on modern nodes. An F2 pool actually mined one of these back in, I think, like 2013 or 2014. They made one of these blocks. So as you're syncing the chain, you'll actually notice one of these blocks takes a long time to process. And that's that F2 pool block that has the quadratic hash, basically DOS vector injected into it. So, and then there's the worst one that like 100% that SlipStream had to like basically quell or put the kibosh on, and that was opcode separator. So opcode separator can be used to basically invalidate the signature cache, and you can create transactions that take over 12 minutes to validate. That's a problem because transactions that take 12 minutes to validate is actually longer than a Bitcoin block before the next Bitcoin block would come in. And as such, if you get one of these out onto the network or even do it continuously, like 12-minute block, 12-minute block, 12-minute block, you can really kind of hurt the initial block download on a node. And these are still allowed by consensus. So as part of the learning process, I got to learn a bunch about basically the kind of different ways people can monkey around with Bitcoin script in a non-standard way that creates very negative externalities towards Bitcoin in terms of CPU-based DOS vectors. So those are anything that I consider to slow down a node's ability to validate a block. And yeah, so the second thing is like, what are the use cases for non-standard transactions? And then third, the application of non-standard transactions in terms of generating revenue for a miner. I think those are kind of the main things. Understanding deeply, there's a fourth piece as well, but understanding deeply what types of transactions are actually bad that can still happen in Bitcoin, and who uses these kind of things and for what do they use them for, the market dynamics of once you do this, what happens. And then the third thing is like all the other nuances around Bitcoin Core, besides just the non-standard transactions, like interacting with the code base to do things like prioritize transaction. And we'll get into later the mempool pixel art and how that was made possible by the technology or the development time that came out of SlipStream.
Would you say that now we will face a new paradigm where we'll have lots of like private mempools coming up?
In the short term, I could see that happening. The main reason is that miners will one by one kind of realize the profitability of non-standard transactions, especially not really the actual writing of Bitcoin code or Bitcoin script in a non-standard way, but mainly just bypassing the transaction size limitations and charging Bitcoin for that. And so other pools like F2 pool the other day mined a massive block. And their payment was out of band for certain because the average fee for the block should have been 12 sats per VByte, but there was a 10 sat per VByte 4 megabyte transaction in there. So yeah, that shows to me they're also doing a private mempool. And all these miners are going to probably, not all, like there's Ocean who's not going to be participating in this, but many miners, I believe, will end up trying to do this to make some profit. But what happens is why it doesn't work out long-term is because to offer the service, you actually have to maintain like a developer to maintain your version of Bitcoin Core. You have to worry about the pool mining an invalid block. Like all sorts of things come up when you do this. And if everybody's competing for the same marginal profit, because software, the cost of software is marginal, then essentially the cost of non-standard transactions in these private mempools goes down to the cost of regular Bitcoin transactions, because everybody will be like, okay, well, at least you're paying 1 sat per VByte more. We'll take the data. The point where this kind of, what happens next, I think, is that relay policy will be loosened to meet consensus to some degree, to basically undistort the view of the mempools of the node runners. Or the other way could happen, where consensus actually moves to tighten to match relay policy. And that would give basically node runners and private mempools, like kind of, they'll all be on the same footing. And as such, there's no reason for a private mempool pretty much anymore after that. And fee estimation will kind of return back to normal. But yeah, in the short term, while there's an arbitrage opportunity, yeah, this will create some distortion in mempools, and other miners will start to do this as well, if not just to compete with Marathon on the same ground. So they can go out and say like, hey, we're trying to earn more revenue in terms of Bitcoin for our blocks. And the reason why it was incredibly safe to do with Marathon, in my own opinion, was because Marathon mines 3 to 5 blocks a day out of 144. So even if we have a private mempool, we're not meaningfully impacting, I say we, again, Marathon and I as a contractor can't meaningfully impact fee estimation over any reasonable period of time. Like the contents of the private mempool don't have any meaningful impact. The thing that can happen is you'll see a Mara block. Okay, well, that was filled with a higher fee paying transaction than what was in the regular mempool. And then that transaction you had waiting will get pushed to the next block. So 10 extra minutes.
It's interesting. Sorry, Portland. Let me interrupt you here.
Okay.
It's interesting because you did mention like Ocean Pool for like focus on empowering decentralization into mining, right? I would say like SlipStream blinds or like reinforces anti-censorship. Do you
Absolutely.
think there's gonna be like some sort of like overlap between like these two tools in the future, or not really?
What do you mean, between Ocean and SlipStream?
Yeah, maybe like not Ocean, but how like Ocean is like approaching their like business model.
Oh, the decentralization aspect.
Yes. Yes.
I don't think necessarily SlipStream will inherently lead to decentralization of Bitcoin mining. It may, like, if you have a, like, let's say you start a pool tomorrow and you offer Stratum V2 and you offer a SlipStream-like service, you'll actually make more on a per block basis. And as such, maybe you'll incentivize more people to join your decentralized pool because you're making more money than all the other pools. So people will go, oh, wow, these guys are making money. Like, let me join up. And then the other thing too is with Stratum V2, the node runners themselves that are hooked into the miners that they control can actually modify the template. They can run their own version of SlipStream on their decentralized Bitcoin mining node. And as long as basically the pool accepts their final template, yeah, you can actually, like, SlipStream will help miners earn more money and decentralize Bitcoin further. I think that would be the overlap right there.
Piccolo, the more I talk to Bitcoin developers, the more ignorant I feel. I guess that's good.
Welcome to my world. I mean, the more I dig down, the more you actually start understanding it, the more you realize how little we actually know. That's
We're
why I
learning
made
lots.
a point. Yeah.
Yeah, we're learning lots today, Portland. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's even to me too. Like, Bitcoin's so amazing because every time I open up a door, there's more doors open. And by opening a door, I mean like learning about Bitcoin. So I go dive into something like base 58. How did the prefixes come out of that? How come the pay to script hash always has a 3 at the start of it? Okay, well, let me go figure that out. And then like that just opens up more doors. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin for me right now. Is the best part of the journey is everywhere I open a door, there are more doors to open. It's not like the total things about Bitcoin I don't understand is decreasing. It's actually increasing further and further. And yeah, that's the best part, is there's always more to learn. It's a never-ending journey to learn it all. And I kind of joke, I don't think anybody can learn it all. I think even if you spent your entire lifetime, you could get pretty close, but you wouldn't know everything about Bitcoin. And a final kind of like thing about like ocean mining, and specifically Luke, he actually in 2013 advocated for is standard being turned off. And Allegis, the pool, was it called Allegis? I believe so. His pool actually had
Allegis.
Allegis had is standard turned off, and he said, let me see if I can find it real fast. If not, that's fine. But to some degree, I'm not going to try to compare myself to Luke or anything, but maybe like even if I'm wrong on SlipStream in terms of its outcome and like effect on Bitcoin, maybe I'm just kind of walking on that same journey. But this is from Luke Jr. in 2013, February 1st, 2013. Blocking out non-standard transactions in general just harms potential innovation. I think I agree with that statement still, but obviously his journey is a lot longer than mine. So maybe he saw something in terms of like the way people use non-standard transactions. It's not good for Bitcoin that I haven't discovered yet. And I did approach him on this topic, right? So immediately after launching SlipStream, me and Luke talked in a Twitter space, and I asked him about this. Like, why did you run Allegis with is standard off, but now you've taken the opposite approach of kind of implementing these different filters to make is standard even more limiting? And he says the following thing: by running the pool the way he does it, he said that only these types of transactions that SlipStream allows can only be spam transactions. And by spam, arbitrary data. He says there's no other possible use for it. So I don't know how far that kind of goes, and I still haven't discovered the full effects of SlipStream, but definitely we've had some inquiries for non-spam uses of SlipStream and use cases of like open timestamps and kind of like these double op returns and stuff like that on chain. So yeah, just a little bit of kind of just looking at the opposite side of things, and not just from the perspective of like, hey, the miner's trying to just get as much money as possible, but somebody who does have experience in industry, right? Or I call it industry, but it's really just Bitcoin, right? And being a core dev, that yeah, like there's definitely my belief aligns with Luke's belief in 2013. So
I see. Thank you, Portland. I don't have like any more questions for now, but maybe Piccolo has like something to ask you about like, the mosaic thing.
Yeah, but maybe for SlipStream, just explain a little bit for our audience, like if you are somebody who wants to use this service, exactly what do you do?
Yeah, so basically slipstream.mara.com is the website, and you basically can just paste in transaction hex. I'm deploying an update to it tonight to add in a few more little guardrails, which will be documented as well, mainly for the dev, basically upgrade hooks to Bitcoin. But yeah, it basically pay 2.5x on any transaction, and you can get it into Mara's mempool directly, and that transaction does not get broadcast to any other node. So even if you want to do just your regular Bitcoin transaction, maybe you just support Marathon, right? You can submit it through SlipStream, and then you'll go right into Marathon's mempool, and you wait like 12 hours, and your transaction will pop out in a block. The other thing too is like you can do non-standard things. So like, let's say you want to do double op returns in your transaction, you can do that. Or maybe you want to do an op return that is over 10 kilobytes. You can do that. It basically allows any transaction that is valid Bitcoin to get mined into a block if the person pays the fee, which is 2.5x the current mempool estimate for the highest priority fee.
Gotcha. All right. Okay. Let's talk about mempool pixel art, and specifically the M block or the Marathon block that earned you a lot of hate, and again unfounded, as I believe, since people don't know what the fuck they're talking about. The cool thing about that, as we were talking pre-show, is really the ability to have ultimate control of your, block generation template, right? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I want to first say that I personally am okay with people, if they love it, great. If they hate it, that's fine too. Like everybody's entitled to their opinion. I do want to throw out one thing that kind of does suck about that specific one, is that like just calling PortlandHODL a shitcoiner for doing basically like graffiti on chain, which has been done by so many people.
Portland, you know what we talked about. I'm gonna shitcoin right along with you, brother. If that's shitcoining, I'm gonna fucking shitcoin. baby.
Yeah, building on Bitcoin, like I've never owned any of these other tokens or anything like that before. And even now, I don't own them. With that said, though, just because I do something very novel and unique in Bitcoin, it kind of sucks to have everybody just go, "You're a shitcoiner" immediately. And I don't know. It's
You know
fine.
what that means? That means you're doing something right, Portland.
No,
That
it's
means
yeah,
you're
that's my
doing
point.
something beyond the understanding of like common, chimpanzee brains. That's why
No,
people are hating. It
no,
blows their minds. It's like, why are you doing this? No,
it's
Bitcoin
because
is money only. This is not money.
like I'll go into that a little bit deeper later and kind of the philosophical element of like why I believe it's okay. And but yeah, at the end of the day, what was the
Listen, you
M
don't
block?
have to on this show. I mean,
Okay.
you don't have to. Look, our show is called Build on Bitcoin. You just
Yeah,
built on Bitcoin. I'm not
so
gonna
basically
fucking, have you defend building on Bitcoin.
I'll do a quick like little side commentary. A lot of people put Bitcoin like on an absolute pedestal. It's like a Ferrari in the garage, and that's the most important, like, or the biggest thing they have is like their Bitcoin stack, right? And everybody believes if you give a normal guy a Ferrari, he's gonna go, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna take care of it. I'm gonna baby it, blah 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 blah," and like wash it and stuff. But I like building and I like experimentation. I love tough challenges that don't have like any like negative externalities that like are actually bad. And as such, yeah, I kind of took the Ferrari off-roading, right? Like I did something cool with it. I jumped it and made an absolute spectacle. Like this is what this technology can actually do when you apply engineering to this thing that's a permissionless protocol. So yeah, I played around on the most fun toy on earth, right? Which is Bitcoin. And so, but yeah, with that, like, how did the M block become an idea? So with SlipStream, it was, okay, we can take non-standard transactions. But also another thing I kind of mentioned is like, you have control over this block template. And with SlipStream, you're taking in these non-standard transactions, but how can we go above and beyond with that? Next is like controlling the template and the order of transactions, positioning, and like, can we guarantee with a service level agreement that maybe like you want to buy block space from me today at 20 sats per VByte, and in the future you think it's going to go up in price? How can Marathon guarantee that when they do find a block, they're going to be able to get your transaction priority? So with that said, like, I don't think that's actually become a service, but that was kind of the logic behind it, is that you could guarantee somebody a slot in a block and sell them a certain amount of space if needed. So with that said, okay, now SlipStream's kind of live. We're doing custom transactions, double op returns, and like all this stuff. And it's fun. We're building. Now, how do you prove we have perfect template control? And the CTO mentioned, okay, you can prioritize transactions. He said that he saw at a conference mempool.space, right? And mempool.space has like the blocks falling, or like not falling, but being created in real time in the mempool. And he asked, like, can you control that to the point where you can draw like pixel art? And I just instantly jump and go, yeah, I can do that for sure. And I thought this was going to be the easiest task in the world. I would just go prioritize, 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 prioritize. And I had to learn a whole lot about Bitcoin and how blocks are constructed in template generation to make that actually work. There were 2 failed attempts in the process, but both were incredibly minimal. And actually,
Wait, only 2 failed attempts?
yeah,
Huh,
there was
okay.
like, I'll go through some of that stuff, but yeah, basically like on chain, there are 2 failed attempts, and each one basically, the second one wasn't even that bad. It was just like, it was like mid load. We lost some of the transactions because the block got mined before the prioritization. And so the template engine just sucked down those high fee paying transactions and put them in a Mara block. So we end up using like basically like 1/16 of a block that just got ate up by Mara transactions. And then the other one was the first attempt was a complete botch. And we still got fees and everything, but it didn't show the letter M. Everything was just ordered in this really weird way. And so, yeah, going through that entire journey of getting that perfect level of control to where you can literally pixel perfect control the transactions in a Bitcoin block, there was a lot of engineering that had to be kind of built. And the 2 main components are the prioritization engine, which prioritizes transactions, and then a feedback mechanism, which is something that watches your get block templates, and you give it an expected order. So what you think the template should look like in terms of the thing you want to create, in this case, a letter M, and then it'll check the transactions in the template that's being generated. And if any are out of place, you have to kind of like wiggle them a little bit. So you'll prioritize them by so much, okay, if it's too high, you'll deprioritize, but you'll basically do like a binary search until it fits into its slot. You can do that incredibly fast. So it's kind of like what happened was you had to basically find a way to prioritize transactions and then keep them in the right priority so they didn't lose their spots. Now, the other thing too is, why did Marathon use their own transactions for this block? And why didn't we go with just the mempool ones? Well, we actually have done some testing with just mempool ones. They work just fine. The biggest problem is though, like if we use just the mempool ones, then you don't get a good color gradient because we can pick from green, which are like the 1 sat per V bytes or 2 sats per V bytes hanging out in the mempool. But the fees were so low on Bitcoin during this like period on mainnet that we could just get a dark yellow. And that's not a good color palette to work with. So at the end of the day, it was a judgment call that to make sure that this was the most ideal image possible in terms of the output, that Mara was going to basically fund itself for this transactions, there are multiple of them, and then broadcast that, and then just basically have it work for the fact that to show we could do that. And so what happens next is, okay, let's make transactions that fit the requirements of mempool.space. First thing, color is determined by fee rate. So the way the M block was made, 1 sat per V byte, the green, and 1 sat per V byte is green. So all the green pixels are 1 sat per V byte. The yellows are 150 and the reds are 2000 sats per V byte. Those were basically $133 a pixel that went back into Marathon as a fee. So now you have to create transactions that hit that fee rate. So to hit that fee rate, you have to calculate the fee rate. And that's done by the amount of weight units divided by the number of sats that you're putting in to get the actual sats per V byte. And so I actually had this kind of like fun little thing where to make these pixels all the exact same size, and they're all 420 weight units. So I made the transactions as small as possible.
420?
Yes, every single
All
one's
right.
420. Yeah, for the memes. And so the reason why I did that was an incredibly small transaction size, which would leave enough room so that after I got done with my 7,396 pixels, which is the 86 by 86 grid that is mempool.space, there's actually a bunch of actual random transactions from the mempool in there. They just don't show up. The third of that block was actually genuine fee-paying transactions. Like my art that I did for Marathon only took up 2/3 of that block. So with that said, yeah, I want to make them small to leave more room to obtain more fees from the regular mempool. And so, yeah, I did. How do you get all the transactions to be 420 bytes in size or weight units in size when you create a transaction, you have to sign that transaction. The reason why we had to sign all the transactions and we couldn't do anybody can spend is because some of these were paying 2000 sats per V byte and everybody would just steal them, right? So I had to put a signature on them. When you sign a transaction, the signature is a variable length. Sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer. And so what I did was I created a system where the first output is an op return that is a smiley face. And the reason why I did that was to make sure the transaction is over 65 bytes in non-witness data size so that you don't create that attack vector of a 64 byte transaction that can be used to spoof Merkle trees. Okay, so that's covered. So I got my smiley face op return, but then I have a double use case for the second op return. The first use case is to get my transactions to all be the same size. So they're all classified as the same size pixel on mempool.space. And that is basically what I would do is I would take the op return and I would fill it with 3 random characters. And I would sign the transaction and I would get a weight unit like 418. Well, that's not 420. So then I would add new text to the op return. So I'd do another 3 random characters. I would sign it again. Maybe it'd be 423. And then, okay, let's do it again. And then I re-sign it after putting 3 new op return characters. And then boom, 420. And I did that for all 7,396 transactions. So they're all the same size because I basically grinded the signatures. So they're all 420 weight units in size. But what is the second bonus of like, hey, we're doing a non-standard transaction because we're doing the double op returns? Well, the coolest part about that is Marathon could have lost a lot in fees if that block would have gotten orphaned. Because when a block gets orphaned, which AKA some other chain from another part of the network outruns your block that you just mined, so AKA known as Marathon mines a block, F2 pool mines a block at the exact same time, basically. Half the network has Marathon's block, half the network has F2 pool's block. Somebody else is going to mine a block on top of one of these sides of the chain. Now, I'm going to show you the worst case scenario where we actually could have lost the entire thing and how I engineered around that. Let's say F2 pool mines the next block on top of their block. So they might basically mine 2 blocks in a row. What happens to that block Marathon mined that got onto one half of the network? That block gets basically orphaned. So it gets pulled off of that side of the chain. And then all the transactions in that block are then read through and attempted to be re-injected into the mempool so that a miner could re-mine those transactions, so that if anything was on one side of the fork that's not on the other side, and by fork, it's an accidental fork. It's not like somebody tried to hard fork it. It's just literally just the nature of just difficulty adjusted proof of work in the Poisson distribution. Okay, so if the transactions were standard and our block got pulled off of the orphan side of the fork, the mempools of the nodes that had that block would actually reintroduce all of those insanely high fee paying transactions that were in Marathon's mempool into their own mempools, and they would propagate out to the miners, and the other miners would steal the money. But with is standard, which most nodes run, if they tried to inject that block or re-put that block in the mempool.
Oh,
you can go.
Portland. Just now, I mean, this is not perhaps common knowledge, but there are always miners out there waiting to fee snipe.
Absolutely.
Yep. Keep going.
And so basically what would happen is the majority of nodes, the mining nodes, other than the F2 pool, would try to inject the orphan block transactions to take them, but they would all get rejected from the mempool acceptance because of the fact that they're non-standard. Their nodes would go, hey, these are non-standard. We're not taking these into our mempool. The exception is F2 pool with 18% of the hash rate. They do allow double op returns, but that was a risk I was willing to take because the chances of them are 1 in 5 that they're going to get the next block. And so what I set up is so that if by chance we have the orphan block, we can see that our block got orphaned. And I had a dead man switch, was a transaction that spent all those outputs into basically a new output instead of doing mempool art. And I would basically bump that fee up to like some crazy number so that Ant Pool hopefully would mine the next transaction and Marathon wouldn't lose the 2.5 Bitcoin that were used to basically pull this off. So that's kind of like part of the engineering, is like not losing those Bitcoins, right? Because they sent me the Bitcoins and the thing was, don't screw up with the Bitcoins, not along with just not screwing up with the artwork. You got to make sure that, first of all, the wallet software you're using to craft the transactions doesn't screw up. And there were lots of screw ups with wallet software, especially when you register 7,396 new addresses in that wallet software. And the Python Bitcoin lib was the one I used. And so you create all these addresses and suddenly it can't parse the addresses for the UTXOs that have values. So it no longer can keep track of the accounting. So I had to build a custom module to do that. So it would parse Bitcoin Core to get the values at each of these out points. And yeah, so the next thing is, okay, final piece of this whole thing, not losing the money in the worst way possible. The worst way would be that I go to use the private mempool that Marathon has as part of SlipStream, and those transactions get leaked or broadcast to the regular network, and they just absolutely get eaten up by a miner, and we lose the money that way too. So, and by money, I always mean Bitcoin. So yeah, at the end of the day,
of course, there were there's nothing else that's money.
There were so many things that could have gone wrong with that. And the only 2 things that went wrong were the first block we did on mainnet was so unrecognizably bad that it just looked like Marathon lost out on like 6% of fees because transactions were just ordered really wrong. But it wasn't invalid. We still collect the subsidy and we still collected the fees. That's great. And the second one was literally Marathon mines a block every about 8 to 12 hours. And I have this new template generation tool to like monitor the templates and all this stuff. So it could not go wrong, other than one risk I said that was possible. If I'm in the middle of loading this for 1.5 minutes while it takes to put all the transactions into the mempool of the node, it will pick from those high fee paying transactions and mine those into a block. And lo and behold, I'm sitting there loading up the template generators with these transactions, and Marathon finds a block, and it comes from the 1 out of N number of template generators they have, and it literally mines that block. And that block contains about 85 of these high fee paying red transactions. And so next thing is I gotta basically create another portion of my script that recursively goes in and finds the missing UTXOs that got spent and recreates new UTXOs to spend from for the block art. So this happens like 11:49 p.m. and I just right. And then next thing you know, by 2 a.m., I was ready to reload M block in the chamber and then create that. there was one bug in the M block that happened. So the keen-eyed of the mempool observers saw that the M block was off center by 1 pixel, right? So it shifted to the point where it had 7 on the right, 5 on, or 7 on the left,
Wait.
5 on the right.
And that, sure, I guess as a big company, that's a mess up. If you're like a small guy and just you're off by what, a centimeter, boo-hoo, you know? But okay, keep going.
Like the reality is nobody at Marathon cared because the amount of marketing value they got from that, like all eyes were on Marathon for an entire day. And the total opportunity cost of that was basically $14,000 in foregone fees. It was a no-brainer in terms of the value, like absolute no-brainer.
Gains and
Yeah.
returns on investment on PR and marketing for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like basically like 6,000 Twitter followers because of that. Like it was overall a unanimous success and a great demonstration of the technical capacity. But yeah, so the off by 1 error was induced. And I said to people at Marathon, I am 99% sure there's an off by 1 error in this, but my monkey brain couldn't visualize the fact that the off by 1 error wouldn't turn it diagonal. So I thought basically by having a missing pixel, it would basically start rotating it. I was wrong, and it actually starts shifting it. And the reason why it's off by 1 is because I didn't pop the 1 transaction off the stack for the coin-based transaction that is automatically injected by mempool.space. So the bottom left of that grid in mempool.space is always the coin-based transaction. And the ordering of transactions it reads as part of the squares is basically bottom left to top right. So it scans left to right like an old TV from the bottom to the top. And so, yeah, basically that coin-based transaction pushed everything over to the right by 1. But because of the way that it basically reads the transactions, and both the left and the right side of the original image were both green pixels, the column of green pixels on the right side just got pushed over to the left. So that ended up with our little not perfect M that we had. But overall, that was such a small nuance that like basically 1% of people saw, and it still demonstrated the technical capabilities to an insanely high degree that was understandable by so many people.
Yeah, fascinating. Plans to do more of this if people approach you? Pixel art on the mempool?
I would say that right now there's no talks in doing that in Marathon. The risk is way too high because, again, like I mentioned earlier, you can literally lose all of the fees, and that those red pixels are insanely expensive. As such, no, it's probably not in the style that Marathon did it. I keep kind of floating the idea of just as a second flex, not just like doing the custom transactions to guarantee like a perfect picture that is something that is exactly as the person intended it to be, but instead just pulling transactions from the regular mempools. Like your block template already has these things in there, just maybe ordering them in a cool way that maybe like makes a picture or something, puts all the big blocks in mempool.space in the center, and maybe makes a logo or something. And that way Marathon wouldn't be foregoing any fee opportunities, but at the same time creating a nice little visual like coffee art on their blocks. And not that that is incredibly useful in terms of the artistry, but more so because of the technical capabilities required to do something like that. So that would be the more ethical way. Oh, can I go into one thing about like the ethics of this block, quote unquote?
Please.
Because in terms of crafting this thing, like I don't want to be called a shitcoiner. And I thought, okay, like I understand that people are going to be upset about this. Like this is crazy. It's something that is incredibly technically difficult to do, but it also is using Bitcoin for a non-monetary use case that is shifting Bitcoin around. Instead, it's used as a demonstration and a marketing stunt, right? As well as like building all the tooling behind to basically optimize transaction ordering in your blocks. But there was, in terms of the stuff that Marathon did, there was no ordinal, there was no inscription at all. There was no NFTs or BS. It was all transactions with double op returns. And why that is so cool is because of the fact that there are no UTXOs left over in the UTXO set. Every single one of those UTXOs ended up getting destroyed. So the UTXO set got cleaned up because of that. So in terms of the actual harm to a Bitcoin node, it's the only thing one could say is the 600 some kilobytes of data during the initial block download that would be required to basically validate that transaction or those transactions in that block. That's it. So you do have to download an extra 600 some kilobytes of data to do this. And yeah, at the end of the day, even the act of not putting signature ops on the outputs, like that is great because there's no additional signatures that have to be validated. It was very, very lightweight to say the least. And it was meant to be the most ethical way possible to demonstrate perfect control over template generation.
Perfect. All right, Portland. I thought we were gonna have more time to talk about other stuff, but hey, we're gonna have a follow-up episode where we're gonna invite some of the guests, that have had fire episodes to do like a panel and stuff. If we ever have a panel on like mining, mempool and stuff, would you come back and join us?
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite topics. Mempools and
Awesome.
mining and templates and how all this stuff is built and basically all the new skills I learned from
Cool.
how can you
House to the
create the
house to the
yeah, how do you make the best possible template?
Awesome. All right. Before I keep moving, Sovereign,
Sure.
anything from your side before we start moving to wrap?
No more questions for Portland. I just want to be thankful to him for coming to Bob Radio. Learned lots today. And I'm realizing that I need to do more homework on my side. So appreciate
We all
it.
do, sir. We all do.
Yeah, sorry if I
right.
went a little long in the tooth on some of these topics, especially like the finer details. I
Brother,
think maybe I did too big of a
We
drill down.
Too
wanted the full PortlandHODL experience,
Oh, you
and
got the full thing right
yeah,
there.
we got it. Awesome. All right. For the wrap, you're gonna obviously tell our audience where to find you, etc., what you're working on. But before we do that, we flip the table on our guests, and we let our guests ask us, me, Sovereign, or Bob Space, one question. Any question? If you don't have one, let's wrap. You have a question for us?
My question is, through the thick and thin of the controversy that has been PortlandHODL's contracted tenure at Marathon, what are your honest opinions about the direction and the things I have done?
Okay. I actually, Sovereign, I know Portland a lot better. Maybe you want to go first, and then I'll give him my take.
I'll keep it short. I don't know you that much, Portland, and your background. So far, what you've achieved with like SlipStream, I think it's a medal you should wear proudly. But eventually, like, time will tell. So yeah, I don't want to like position myself too much ahead of time. Piccolo.
Yeah, Portland, your journey is exactly the way I thought it would go when we first started talking. Because, and as you describe your story, you're the guy who do proof of work. You find something which is wrong, and instead of bitching about it, you go out and do it, right? And whatever you do, you have principles and rationale and logic behind what you do. So for me, keep building, fuck all the haters, let's fucking go.
Absolutely, 100%. And I do love all the haters equally as just as much as the people who love this stuff. So
yeah,
again,
not me though, just you. You're much nicer man than me. Yeah.
So cool. Yeah.
All right.
So that was my question to you guys.
Cool. Can you as a rep, please tell our audience, where to find you and follow you if they want to know more about what you do and all those things.
Yeah, I think the best way to find me would be on Twitter. Follow at the handle PortlandHODL, PortlandHODL. And you should see me and my fiance as the PFP. And I believe probably for a while, the pinned post is going to be my slideshows about Sparrow, how to use it as a wallet. And you should notice there's a bunch of educational material throughout my timeline that describes various things in Bitcoin and how you can basically learn kind of the basics of Bitcoin, a lot of UTXO stuff, wallets, etc. So I hope it's a great learning resource for anybody just getting into Bitcoin, is to find these slide decks and just read through them. You'll through just the act of seeing these words, you will learn about Bitcoin, and then you'll become a better builder on Bitcoin. And yeah, then from there, the links and stuff can go to GitHub and whatnot.
Bro, can I be honest? I mean, I have several of your slide decks, saved, but in JPEG, I keep forgetting to ask you for like the whole PDF deck, so I don't have to fucking take screenshots. But
I-
yeah, that's my problem, isn't it?
I will eventually upload all of them to GitHub repository. Right now, they're stored on Google Slides, a very centralized and awful service, but they did
Mhm.
do what I wanted them to do.
Oh my God, Portland, you're a real shitcoiner now. PortlandHODL uses Google, guys. Okay, folks, with that, it's a wrap.
Thank you again, Piccolo.